I often think Paul was raised in a minister's family, and I think he at times takes kind of a pastoral approach to his medical practice, and I think of stewardship, and I think of shepherding people through medical illnesses and medical problems. You'll rarely see anybody who has that kind of a connection with his patients, especially now. He's seen some of them for 30 to 40 years.
Well, I've known Paul probably for at least 30 years, maybe 35 years, both as one of my physicians and also as a very good friend.
They were friends, almost like relatives, every last patient of his.
I think that Paul will be one of those that the staff, the patients, and the community will definitely miss over time.
And he's really everything a family doctor should be.
We had great parents, fantastic parents, warm, and very big on family, very big. My dad, Ward, was very big into teaching his kids that the reason that we were put on this earth was to serve others. And he wished and prayed that his kids would go into meaningful professions that would help people.
I suppose, you know, directly or indirectly, all that has an impact on one as they grow up in a family. I think we saw a lot of that, you know, service for your fellow man. And
one of his high school English teachers kind of turned him towards medicine.
Ever since I can remember, we always wanted to be a doctor. I think we were expected to go to college, and that was just it.
Back when Paul and I were in college, I think going to medical school was kind of it. They used to say if you didn't get into medical school, you'd try dental school. Didn't get into dental school, you'd go to the seminary or law school. That was it, because then you wouldn't have to get drafted for Vietnam. You had to be pretty sharp back in those days, not only just to get into medical school, but to continue to learn and continue to kind of hone your skills. You had to be pretty sharp, and Paul was sharp. One night, we got up, we snuck around the frat house, and we turned everybody's alarm ahead a couple hours, their watches, everything. So they all got up 2 hours early, ate, went to class, and they got over there and they realized we're 2 hours early. So they came back, and we had barricaded ourselves in our room because it didn't take long for them to figure out who did it.
Behind every great man, there's a great woman. I love Julie. Julie's a sweetheart. She's a good mom, a good family nurse, a good lover.
Oh, I think she's kind of the end-all be-all for him, truly, vice versa too. She kind of worships the ground he walks on, so that's fun to see.
In 1969, I was in nurses training. Paul was in medical school. He was a junior in medical school. So he actually went to my nursing instructor and asked for my name and credentials. Later, we ended up in the elevator at Mount Sinai Hospital, all by ourselves in the elevator. Neither said one word to one another. And so then after that, I waited for him to call. I was hoping that he would. And it took him about 3 weeks, and he did call, and we had our first date. We went to the Dairy Queen.
I remember Paul coming over in his, I don't know if it was a yellow or blue, really fancy Corvette, and I thought, oh wow, you know, off they'd go, and it was really fun. And so that's how they started their relationship, and ended up getting married.
They adored him, very much so.
It just seemed to fit together. They were so matched, and it was just wonderful.
Similar background, Scandinavian, and just, yeah, it was a good fit.
I just thought, oh, he's comes from a great family, he's Scandinavian, and he fits right in.
Not a hard transition at all, to love her up.
And I met Julie just intermittently through the clinic and stuff as she'd stop in, and I just thought they were a wonderful couple. They were made for each other. They lived right across the street from us up on North Shore Drive.
We started out in Forest Lake, Minnesota, in an apartment on North Shore Drive, and got our first addition to our family, which was a boxer puppy.
Their boxer puppy peed, pooped, and puked on the carpeting. Gene and I owned part of the apartment complex.
Kind of wanted to search around for a place to live, so we decided upon Scandia. We found some land and built a house, and we're still in the same house after 38 years.
He doesn't seem like a big city slicker to me. And I think we kind of felt as kids that we were raised in kind of a small town situation. Robbinsdale was very small townish. We walked everywhere. And I think maybe that played a little bit of a role because that was very cozy.
I think that Paul always was looking for a smaller rural community.
Scandia has been a real treasure, and Paul and Julie are the first to say that they put their love into that home, and it is a home with their family and kids, and there's a lot of memories flooding.
It meant a lot over the course of our life, raising our children in the country, and
it gets encompassed into every child. You can reminisce and tell old stories from history of our parents and from the old countries and various places, and we get the essence in Scandia of that same type of history.
Dad would go out and cut wood because we had lots of trees to cut down. Handling the wood and throwing it in the basement and stacking it up, it kept our house as cozy as could be. It's just beautiful, full of nature, full of deer, full of beautiful trees and land.
I think when you're in a situation where you're in a small town like that, you have more opportunity to make some of those relationships that are long-term. You're not so much a number, but you're part of the community, and he had a pretty big part of the community being the family doc.
I think Paul in the town of Scandia is an extremely well-respected individual from both a citizen as well as a physician.
We had a family practice here in Forest Lake all these years. We were our own boss at that time. We were independent. We were not attached to anybody.
Our docs could do a lot of stuff. Did surgery, C-sections, appendectomies, did a lot of trauma.
We delivered a lot of babies, hemorrhoidectomies, you name it.
Most of the time, sore throats, earaches, no big deal. But every once in a while, somebody would be sick in there, and you better figure out who it was and get it taken care of. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. We didn't have anybody going home dying. So it was a good clinic, good group of people.
It was probably the most fun times we ever had, was back then.
Yeah.
Dr. Olsen always talked about camaraderie, and that's exactly what we did have.
We were all friends as well as being fellow practitioners.
Paul and I have been in the clinic together for 35 years, and I'll bet probably 2/3 of that time we've either been in the same office or next door to each other. And people would consider us, we were once described as joined at the hip.
I think that was the best thing, is the camaraderie, liking each other, enjoying each other. You know, like Paul and I and Harvey shared an office together.
There was a time when there were 3 in an office, and it was Paul and I and Dave Olson, and it would get a little wild in there. You would come into the office and occasionally find somebody on the floor.
So all of a sudden I heard a big clunk back in the hallway. Went into the room, and here they were wrestling on the floor.
I can remember I was on the phone talking to a patient, and those two snuck in behind me, pulled me down on my back on the floor. The phone shot out of my hand and ricocheted off the wall and the ceiling, came back down, landed on the floor. I crawled over, and the patient was still talking, so I just listened and chimed right in, just like nothing had happened.
I think Paul had a little bit to do with that. He was a little rowdy, I think, back in the, in the early years, but he's since settled down quite a bit.
It was a lot of hard work, and your family became second, not first.
Paul balanced it very well.
He always made time for his family, for sure. They were number one.
The family, I think, was probably priority for him.
We usually took a winter vacation together, and I remember we were at the airport. They wanted us to give up our seats, and they offered us money, a place to stay for the night, and we could leave the next day. But we kind of looked at it like we had plenty of money. What we didn't have was time, and we weren't even going to miss a day to get away.
It was always a real adventure going with the Nerothins on our annual camping trip.
We did a lot of camping over the course of probably 15 years. East Coast, West Coast, Canada.
We covered the plains of South Dakota, Black Hills, Glacier, Banff, Yellowstone, I think at least 2 times, Rocky Mountain National Park, probably some of the best times of our life.
I think they kept their fishing story details pretty private, so I'm kind of curious as to what all went on there.
Yeah.
I told them one time if they took me up there, I'd fry all the fish and do all the dishes, but they never
interesting
offered
that would
that.
be.
So
It's pretty remote.
And the pristine nature was awesome. We were told the grizzly bears were near, so we'd better not clean them at that time, and so we were in this treeless area with a lot of bush. It was actually getting fairly dusky, and we kept thinking we saw bears the whole way and the whole thing. Anyway, we were so exhausted and tired because it was quite a hike.
There were bears in the vicinity, scratches on the doors. Bears were coming to visit us while we were there.
Sleeping fully clothed in these tent shacks and waking up cold, looking at each other, wondering what in the heck we're going to do to warm up. We just headed down this cliff, and we rolled and rocked, and we all got down there hoping that our legs weren't broken and arms weren't broken.
And we were out trolling around, and Paul hooks into a big one right away. We get it in the boat. Of course, I netted it. And it was about a 20-pound lake trout, and we were really excited. And Paul says, "Let's go back. We got to go back to the camp and show everybody." And we get back to the camp.
And from there, the excursion and the fun started. We were catching unlimited amount of Arctic char that day that would take 100 yards of line out faster than you can even begin. The Arctic char were literally boiling and rolling over in this turbulent water, and we looked at each other, all of us looked at each other like, can you believe it? Pinch me or I'll pinch you, you know?
Everybody's throwing their duffel bags out and their camping gear as outdoorsmen do.
And I just remember Paul, who took tourister luggage with wheels on it.
Thinking back on Paul dragging that American Tourister, yellow American Tourister down the dock as we go to Canada, bumping along, dragging it by a string.
The looks on the Inuit guides that we had there, the looks were priceless. They couldn't believe that a guy like this carrying that kind of baggage would be up in the Arctic Circle fishing for Arctic char.
That really was the conversation piece of everybody, and he had the good sense of humor of telling us that we really missed the boat, you know, and took our other bags and different things. But
we were very cramped and had no space in the old clinic, but it kept us together and physically would see each other.
So then we had to move.
Yep, we built the new clinic in 1996. Friday afternoon, we closed the Forest Lake, the old Doctor's Clinic Ltd., and Monday morning opened up at the new site. It separated everyone. And then eventually, whenever we went computerized 97 or whatever, you didn't go and talk to them, you sent them a message. It was like...
I still have patients coming up to me and saying, you know, when I came to you, you looked at me, you listened to me, you talked to me. Now the doctor has his back to me playing with some sort of computer. Managed care was our foe throughout the whole practice. The medical decisions were being made by administrators and that sort of thing. They kept on pushing us to see more patients, do less for them, and charge more.
That type of medical practice or that type of practice is not going to be anymore. They're trained differently. It's a production thing, it's a number thing, and I think that was probably the hardest thing for us old-timers to get used to.
I would like to be practicing yet. I think I still could. I still read. I think Paul would like to go on too if it were like it was 30 years ago.
I can't keep up with it. Yeah. And I don't think he really wanted to towards the end there either. He knew it was time, just like I did.
I don't think Paul was very interested in being a doctor. I don't think I was very interested in being a doctor. I just thought it was a big deal to get into medical school.
The man is a carpenter at heart. He would rather fix something than do anything else. That's where his true skills lie, not in medicine.
And it's a good thing they didn't let him become a full-time surgeon, because I've watched him work with jackhammers on concrete and saber saws cutting apart cast iron bathtubs up in Moose Lake.
I think you can tell that Paul probably goes to sleep thinking about what his next project will be outdoors. Anybody that has seen his gardens or seen the outdoors, I think he should have been on some state payroll or something out there, because he's really done just a beautiful job.
And how he could lift mountains over all over the place. He was just amazing. He knew how to do everything. And if he didn't know, he'd find out, and most of the time he did it himself.
In my opinion, Paul has a ways to go on being an expert landscaper. He's worked hard at it. He's put a lot of oomph and effort into it. Endangered his body. Fell off of roofs trying to be a landscaper. He's a kind of guy that really studies his lesson pretty well and knows what's going on, and if you want something built, it's going to be built perfectly. I've just watched his product. I wish I was as good as he is sometimes.
Whatever he does the best. He's very meticulous at everything he does. So yeah, I think he could be anything he would have wanted to be, for sure.
He once told me that he wished he had been a farmer, and that he thought he would have been a good farmer, and I believe that. I think he would have been. But I think I know that he has recently told me that no regrets, best thing he ever did, best decision.
Paul is a wonderful example of a family doctor. He came out in the old days when he was doing C-sections and appendectomies and delivering babies and taking care of heart patients, and you're going to have a hard time getting that perspective nowadays.
In the face of pressure, he was always, I thought, calm. Did a good job.
He has been the most caring, professional, and I think a throwback to the old years, the way physicians should be.
You can still see him sitting. He gets in his little rolling chair, and he sits just like this and talks to his patients, which I think is wonderful.
His goal is a high elevation of family care that I think will be unmatched by many in the profession.
I meet up with some of his patients in my job as a social worker, and he gets pretty much rave reviews.
When Megan got diabetes, Paul and Julie were at our door. I'm going to help you through this. I've never known a professional who will be weeding his garden in the morning, go take a shower, come over and look at a blood sugar book in the afternoon to help adjust insulin.
If you had an illness or sickness, would always call at home, at night, or on a weekend to see how you're doing. And I don't think you find that much anymore, and Paul's the real deal.
Our son developed another complication. He even took time on his day off to follow us down to Children's Hospital to get the input of a specialist.
And I remember at about age 50, I went in the office one day and Paul said, "It's time." It was about this long, only it was black. And he said, "I'm going to put this right up your cut."
I'll be retiring in late July, and I think, like Paul, kind of wondering, what things are going to be like after that. Anybody who's worked as long and has, MD in their identity as much as Paul and I, you kind of wonder, what's going to happen after that. We're looking forward to it. I know Paul's looking forward to it too.
Everybody always asks you, so what are you going to do when you retire? And And my response was, I have no idea because I've never not worked.
You know, I was a paper boy at age 12, and I've always worked. So to not have something to do or something I have to be responsible for, that's not easy. But I think Paul will do all right. I think he'll, you know, his yard will get better. And but I don't know how much better it's going to get because it's pretty nice now.
I do tell Paul that maybe you should get into more perennial gardening. It would be easier on your back and knees.
You've come to know people on a very, very personal level, and you take it for granted until they aren't there every day.
But I think Paul's practice, similar to Dad's congregation, was a big, huge focal point in his life. So it's hard to pull away from that.
I think he's going to really, really miss his patients.
Paul will miss his people like crazy.
I think he'll have a hard time with that, remembering all these people, seeing them on the road, seeing them on the street, and know that he cared for them for a long time. But I'm also sure that Paul, he's one of the smartest men I know. He's gonna deal with it.
He's got my mom's personality, and he'll pursue, you know, he'll move forward.
I think people are underestimating how much Paul will enjoy it. Paul's a person that takes on responsibility, and he puts his heart and soul and 100% of his dedication into things.
Take off your watch. That's what I did. I took off my watch. I haven't worn a watch since the day I walked out of the clinic.
Don't worry about getting everything done today, because what you don't get done today, there's always tomorrow.
I don't think he's going to have any trouble staying busy because we've seen his numerous interests and far-reaching endeavors through the years.
I'm glad he will not be leaving here, but be with us.
There's an old saying about the person really becomes a gardener when they start growing flowers instead of vegetables, and Paul's been a gardener for a long time. He's loved the flowers, loves the beauty of them. So I think he'll have fun working with that in the future. He's got a lot of time now to do it the way he wants.